History remembers the Cold War for its nuclear standoffs and spies, but the decisive battle was actually fought in the background of everyday life. This was a test between two incompatible ideas. The United States relied on private enterprise and open markets, while the Soviet Union bet on a centrally planned economy directed by the state. Proving which system could organize society and deliver long-term prosperity to its citizens became the definitive challenge of the era. It is easy to assume the Soviet economy was always failing, but in the years following World War II, Moscow engineered a period of rapid, massive industrialization that stunned the West. This was the strength of central planning, brute force mobilization. If the state dictated that all national resources must go towards steel and military production, it happened immediately, without waiting for private investors. This intense concentration of resources allowed the Soviet Union to quickly develop a formidable nuclear arsenal and advanced military hardware. This state-driven focus even allowed Moscow to beat America to the first major milestones of the space race, launching the first artificial satellite and putting the first human into orbit. Central planning is effective when the goal is singular and massive. For decades, it created a terrifying appearance of parity with the United States. The Soviet system could handle heavy industry, but it truly struggled with the immense complexity of a modern society. Pumping out steel is one thing, meeting the varied needs of millions of individual consumers is another. A free market solves complexity through a decentralized network where prices act as signals to meet consumer demands. The Soviet government attempted to manually dictate quotas for every item produced. This central hub became a permanent bottleneck, unable to process the sheer volume of information. Because factory managers were rewarded purely for meeting government targets, they ignored quality. They optimized for state measurements, whether it was total weight or raw quality, regardless of if products were useful. A system designed to hit arbitrary numerical targets on paper is mechanically incapable of satisfying the nuanced needs of a human population. The American system created an innovation feedback loop. Massive government defense spending funded research that private companies eventually translated into profitable products for the civilian market. The Soviet Union suffered from a silo effect. Brilliant military and scientific advancements remained strictly isolated, never reaching the wider civilian economy. By 1969, the contrast was undeniable. The United States landed humans on the moon, while simultaneously building an abundant, high-tech consumer society. The sheer choice available to the average American consumer became a psychological weapon. Images of supermarkets filled with food challenged the narrative of Soviet superiority. Superpower status means little if a nation can build cutting-edge spacecraft, but fails to put basic, high-quality food on its citizens' tables. By the 1980s, the world had entered the information age. This new era demanded rapid flexibility and constant innovation, traits the rigid Soviet system lacked by design. Crushing financial liabilities were accumulating on the Soviet balance sheet. Moscow was struggling to maintain global military parity while simultaneously subsidizing its allied nations. When global oil prices fell in the 1980s, the revenue Moscow relied on to hide its internal failures vanished. Their income plummeted just as their domestic and military expenses reached an all-time high. The United States of America weaponized this vulnerability with the Strategic Defense Initiative. This forced the Soviet leadership into a high-tech arms race they simply could not afford. Washington used its massive economic growth to force Moscow into a technological competition that ultimately broke the Soviet economy. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev attempted to save the system by introducing limited economic restructuring and political openness. This created a fatal paradox. A system built on absolute, top-down control cannot survive being opened up to criticism and flexibility. As economic and political control evaporated, the divide in Europe collapsed. The fall of the Berlin Wall became the physical symbol of a system that had run out of resources. Economic flexibility allowed the United States to adapt, innovate, and sustain itself through a changing world, while the rigid Soviet model proved incapable of surviving its own internal contradictions.